Hello. Uh, One moment here. Thank you so much for joining us here today for Conversations on Collecting with Lucy McGarry. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Griffin Art Project is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Stolo nations. We are honored and grateful to undertake our work here. My name is M. Hanley, and I am the Indigenous Curatorial Assistant at Griffin Art Projects. Just a few housekeeping notes before we jump right into today's presentation. Firstly, I would like to mention that if you would like to see live captions displayed for today's presentations, you can enable this by selecting the CC Live Transcription button at the bottom of your screen. I also wanted to mention that if you're experiencing any technical difficulties with the Zoom interface, we will also be live streaming today's event on Griffin Art Project's Facebook page, so you can watch it from there as well. Okay. One moment. There we go. Lastly, I'll mention that we are using Zoom's webinar format today, which means we cannot see or hear you, but feel free to get in touch using the chat dialog box at the bottom of your screen. There will also be a chance at the end of today's presentation for audience questions, so feel free to type it in the Q&A dialog box, which is actually separate from the chat. So during the Q&A, you'll have the option to ask your question out loud. So if that is your preference, do feel free to indicate so in the Q&A dialog box, or feel free to raise a yellow virtual hand using the button at the bottom of this screen. Today's presentation is being recorded, so if you ask your question out loud, your voice will be captured on the audio recording. As the latest editions of Griffin Art Project's Conversations on Collecting series, this conversation with Lucy McGarry continues to build on Griffin Art Project's mandate to make privately held art collections accessible to the public. So whether you're navigating the complexities of estate planning or facing the prospect of inheriting a cherished collection, or an artist interested in planning for the future, this Conversations on Collecting is intended for enthusiasts and novices alike, offering a supportive environment for those interested in the world of collections, fostering discussions, and invaluable learning opportunities. I would like to take this opportunity to allow Lisa to introduce Lucy.
Thank you so much, Em, and welcome, Lucy. We're so thrilled to have you here with us and to learn more about this stellar project, the RMB Latitudes Art Fair. So the fair launched in 2019 with a mission to, quote, create a transformed, collaborative, and uniquely African art ecosystem. Latitudes also has an online component, and both include numerous carefully curated programs alongside the exhibits. Since the relaunch last year, after a brief closure during cessation during COVID, the in-person fair has already built an astounding audience of 9,000 attendees. So just congratulations, Lucy and your team, for this incredible project. So I'm just going to give you a few biographical notes on Lucy, and then we'll hand it over to you. So Lucy McGarry is co-founder and director of Latitudes Art Fair and Latitudes Online, the largest online marketplace for visual art from Africa. Both the physical fair and the online platform are the first of their kind to take a lateral and flexible approach to mediating art on the continent, according to which galleries, independent artists, curators, online entities, and institutions experience equitable participation. Prior to this, she held the position of curator of the South African Pavilion at the 57th Venice Biennale in 2017. From 2014 to 2016, she was curator of the FNB Joburg Art Fair. From 2009 to 2014, McGarry held the position of curator at Yellowwoods Art, and in 2012, she founded her own company, LMAD Collection, which creates limited edition collections to promote local artists and designers. Prior to this, from 2005 to 2009, McGarry directed the long-term creative projects as gallery director of David Crute Projects in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and New York. Lucy, thank you so much for spending time to be here with us today. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I think I'm going to start by sharing my screen and then I will launch in. Can you see that?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Perfect. Yeah, so good morning to our Canadian guests and evening to everyone or anyone joining in from South Africa. My name is Lucy McGarry. I'm one of the co-founders of Latitudes, an online marketplace dedicated to art from Africa, as Lisa mentioned, as well as RMB Latitudes, which is an annual art fair in Johannesburg, South Africa, along with my business partner and longtime friend, Roberta Kochi. So I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you to Lisa and Em of Griffin Art Projects for the invitation to be part of your Fall Talks program. I hope this talk will give you some insight into collecting and discovering new artistic voices from Africa and the incredible potential for growth in our sector. I live in Johannesburg, and having recently just visited New York and Shanghai, China, like many South Africans, I've been imagining how wonderful it would be to live in a sort of functioning country. On many levels, I wish we could live in a first world city as well, but my endless sort of back and forth, I always come back to the same conclusion. And as with everything, there is a trade-off. We may not have sort of decent public transport, and we live in a country where for the longest time, the most downloaded app was one that tells you when to expect your daily power outages. But despite these constant challenges, there is an intangible magic in Southern Africa. It is a land of change and opportunity, a place where you can make your voice heard and where you can really make a difference in people's lives, which is the reason we do what we do at Latitudes. And here I'm pleased to introduce you to our largely women-led team. So what I'm excited to present to you today is a case study of how, using technology, we've built a multifaceted business that incubates and really mentors emerging artists, provides skills training and educational opportunities, and steadily builds their careers on the international market. You'll see that we do a lot, and hopefully in my presentation, you'll pick up on an aspect that piques your interest. If this is the case, we'd love to hear your ideas on how we can collaborate to help even more artists across the continent to reach a global audience. So Latitudes was founded in 2019 as a physical art fair. At the time, we saw a gap in the market for a more inclusive art fair, one that responds to a uniquely African context, where infrastructure is lacking. Access to tertiary education in South Africa is for the very few, and the number of galleries cannot hope to sustain the exploding number of artists. So after much deliberation, we gathered a team of 5 founding women, and together we asked ourselves why we couldn't build an art fair that was more inclusive. We wanted to break the kind of art fair model of directly importing Eurocentric and American art fair models and create a fair that would break down the inequalities of the art industry and allow galleries, studios, curators, artists, and nonprofit organizations to sell art side by side. So the first edition took place on Joburg's iconic Nelson Mandela Square. And despite having only 3 months to pull it together, we managed to sign up exhibitors who flew in from as far afield as Oslo, New York, and across the African continent. Given the success of our 2019 edition, we planned on scaling up immensely in 2020, but obviously COVID had other ideas. And by March 2020, we knew we had to make another plan. And so this is really the moment where technology transformed our business. We acted extremely quickly, turning our physical art fair model into an online platform. So to be more specific, a third-party marketplace that we built with 2 sets of developers on open source software that we have heavily customized to suit the complex nature of the art market. This has led, we realized quite quickly that this had to be supported by a very complicated logistics network with depots on the ground and trustworthy shipping partners around the world. Getting an artwork from an artist studio in rural South Africa to a collector in the US requires a whole bunch of things like quality checking, archivally sound crating, insurance, delivery. So we launched the platform in July 2020 with 350 artists on the site. And we now have 3,000 artists, or just over 3,000, have been viewed in 200 countries. And over the past 3 years, we have shipped artworks to 27 different countries, from USA to UK, Germany, and even the Bahamas and Serbia. But what really kind of sets Latitudes apart and makes sort of gives us our unique point of difference is that independent artists themselves are invited to open their own profiles and upload artworks and sell their art side by side with top galleries. So in an industry, as you'll know, dominated by rules and politics and contracts, it's nothing short of groundbreaking for a young independent artist to be able to showcase their works alongside established artists that have a global following. The art market for modern and contemporary African art has steadily grown over the last few years. And so this coupled with the pandemic forcing most people online created the perfect launch pad for our online platform. And I think we can safely say that we launched the platform at a very timiest moment, actually. So we were actually one of the COVID success stories, I'm pleased to say. So here you can see, it might just be useful to pull back a little bit and look at the stats about the growth of the art market in general, and then also the recent trending global online art sales over the past few years. Interestingly, after an understandable downturn over 2020, the art market is doing increasingly well, and this could partly be attributed to a surge in online sales and collectors gaining new access to works from every corner of the world. Overall, the global art market was valued at $520 billion in 2023. It is estimated to reach $889 billion by 2032, growing at a rate of 6.15% during the forecast period of 2024 to 2032. Despite the overall dollar value of artwork sold by African-born artists as compared to other regions, the market demand has significantly increased over the last decade. Between 2013 and 2023, total sales increased by a whopping 46%, with 2021 marking the best year for the African art market. $101 million worth of work by African-born artists was sold in that year. In 2023, the post-war and contemporary genre was the best performing at auction, raking in $73.8 million in sales. So sorry, a lot of stats, but I think it's just useful to provide context here. And then however, between 2020 and 2022, the ultra contemporary category for African-born artists has been the sort of largest driver of sales for the region, which is most exciting for us. So the surge in demand for work in this category can be attributed to the much lower price point and appeal to younger generation of art collectors who are more comfortable with actually purchasing online. This growing interest in art from Africa can also be seen in programming around the world. Exhibitions with a focus on African contemporary art and artists are on the rise, like, for example, Griffin's very exciting programming. And I mean, how wonderful was it to see a life in print, William Kentridge and Pablo Picasso at RMB Modern this year. I was lucky enough to see Alan Atsui at the Tate Modern Turbine Hall last year. And we just had 154, for example, art fair at Somerset House in London. And a little like example is a small African gallery called Tiwani, which has just taken pride of place on Cork Street in London amongst all the major galleries, which is super exciting. This is an artist I worked with, Singa Sampson, about 10 years ago, and he was selling artworks for £100. And now he's showing at the White Cube in London, and his last show was a complete sellout. Back home, we are working so closely with so many incredible young artists with the same potential. One such artist is, for example, Cynthia Sifa Mulanga, a refugee from Democratic Republic of Congo. She, 4 years ago, as a student at Artist Proof Studio, a print initiative in Johannesburg, she uploaded her artworks to Latitudes online, and within 2 weeks they had sold out to international collectors. We've facilitated a collaboration with Gucci for Cynthia. She's shown with the Goodman Gallery, a very respected South African gallery. She's shown at art fairs around the world, and she has a long waiting list of collectors who are after her work. So as ours is an online business, we've been interested to monitor the growth in online art sales over the past few years. It is predicted that the online art industry is expected to grow from $9.31 billion in 2023 to $22.4 billion by 2032. Exciting opportunities these are for us, with so many African artists needing exposure. So we've built this platform, but in the process, I must say that we've realized that there are so many different areas that need addressing in a context like SA before we can realize real true success. We need alternative arts education and skills development programs, as well as sales platforms in the real to sustain long-term growth. So to really shift the needle, we also need a new generation of collectors to start collecting with intention. So this is why last year, when we relaunched our physical art fair post-COVID, this time very blessed to be in partnership with a top South African investment bank, RMB, we were very intentional with its execution. So we chose a very beautiful indoor-outdoor venue, Shepstone Gardens. Lisa's actually visited here, and made sure to curate the experience so that the art by over 250 artists from the continent was complemented by lovely food and wine and music, meaning visitors could soak it all in, take their time, and really enjoy the art on offer at their leisure. And just like our online platform, it is important for us to include independent artists. So we invited young curators to curate a show with featuring independent artists. And this is the kind of first of its kind. And it really gives like an electric energy to the fair. These are just a few snaps from the fair and the very beautiful venue. And interestingly, we conduct in-depth post-event research, and it turns out that many visitors bought their first piece of art at the fair, which for us is a true measure of success. So we've kind of carved out a place in the South African art market where we are really for kind of discovery and emerging voices. It's not the high-end sort of inaccessible price point kind of affair. Content. So putting out rich online content keeps our editorial department very busy at Latitudes. The purpose is to keep front of mind for collectors and make art accessible really to a wider audience. We've seen firsthand the impact of content. Research shows that consumers actually need to see something 5 times online before they register it. So we are constantly promoting our artists and artworks across all channels. From our weekly newsletter to our blog and social media platforms. We essentially run an editorial department publishing articles every week. And last year, we were excited to launch our own podcast, which you can see here. And for us, it's very important that people around the world learn about and engage with African art, as ultimately this will lead to a new collector base. And here you can see some of the wonderful speakers that we've had on the podcast, from international to local, and also quite multidisciplinary. Like Sumaya Valley is a very accomplished architect, but with an artistic perspective on her practice. Gallerists, Charles Chuck Collins is actually from San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, but with a passion for African production. So yeah, just a whole wide range of practitioners and voices. And what's more, working with young artists has really given us insight into the gaps that are missing in their practice and education. And as such, early on, we realized the need to launch a new division of Latitudes, which is Latitudes Education. We currently run 2 programs, one for artists and one for curators. Traditionally, we have worked in South Africa, but for the past 2 years, we branched onto the continent and mentored curators not only from South Africa, but also Ghana, Namibia, Mozambique, Botswana, and Nigeria. And what's really rewarding for us is the communities that this is actually creating. And we're actually seeing like collaborations that exist completely outside of us that are just sort of initiated afterwards, which is so great. I'm just going to have a sip of water. Yeah, so as you've seen, we are passionate about discovering and nurturing new talent, which is why in 2022, we launched an award for women identifying artists called the Anna Award. It's imperative for us to create space for women in the art world, and this project is probably one of the closest to our hearts. The winner receives a substantial cash prize, and we help guide her career. This year, we received 780 applications from 28 countries, and we're just really blown away actually by the talent, and also very nice to see how the level of skill has developed from the first award to this year's award. And we just get such amazing artists applying, and then we watch how just giving them exposure, like for example, this artist was from Egypt, and she's now been picked up by a very great South African gallery. So yeah, also just fantastic. And we've also launched a residency program, so the artist can benefit from choosing from a local or international residency. Yeah, so that's just fantastic. And it's called the Anna Award because we actually partnered with Anna, which is a feminine hygiene brand who very generously sponsors the award each year. Okay, so yeah, we actually, after our first fair in 2023, that was when this venue, as it's known now, Latitude Center for the Arts, kind of officially opened. And so what we are excited about is that we actually operate from this space all year round. And so we've called this Latitude Center for the Arts, LCA, and it's a physical multi-purpose exhibition space in Johannesburg dedicated to year-round promotion of artists and galleries on the continent. So it's a neutral space. It's not affiliated to any gallery or corporate, and that's why it's sort of ideally positioned to host a wide array of exhibitions. In a country that lacks these kinds of neutral spaces, museums and public institutions, aren't as prolific or they're not as functional as they are, I suppose, in other parts of the world. So the more of these kinds of spaces, the better. This is really it, just creating a community, which we have. I think the Latitudes community is strong and growing, and we're very grateful for it. And our annual talks program brings to the fair and LCA a highly curated program of discussions by international voices alongside local change makers within our various ecosystems. Here you can see some people attending our talks at the fair. Yeah, and then we also, we are so open to all, many kinds of projects and projects which have an impact on legacy. And we support and collaborate on creating important new content to shift colonial narratives. So, for example, this year I produced and curated Marvelous Realism at the museum, at a museum in China, in Shanghai, called Photographiska. It is a new media museum, a really beautiful space. This was the largest exhibition of contemporary photography in China. And yeah, here you can just get a sense of, there were 18 artists on the show. There was film, photography. Yeah, it was a fantastic experience. 800 people attended the opening. And we were chatting to the PR person for the museum the day after the show, and she was saying that, if you happen to sort of search, not on Google because they don't have that in China, but search for Africa or South African content, the first things to rise to in your feed would be like, you know, rhinos and lions and safaris and that kind of thing. Whereas in the next day, there was so much response to the show that contemporary African art actually came up. And so it's fantastic. And we had an amazing media response. And so just creating these international dialogues is yeah, it's really just scratching the surface. So I think, and they were just nice to know that there's such interest in contemporary African art. Yeah, so when you consider that as a continent, Africa has the largest global youth population and that the creative industries are youth-friendly sector, the potential of the art industry to allow young people to sustain themselves, as well as to create employment opportunities is so inspiring. And we hope to be able to encourage more and more young artists to see themselves as entrepreneurs. Everyone, you know, has this image of the starving artist, but the way we see it, artists should be the new suits. This is why we've worked so hard to create a platform where everybody around the world can literally hop on, search for an artwork, and make a difference in an artist's life. We're extremely excited about what the future holds for Latitudes. What we've built, you know, has the potential for exponential growth. And we've only just, as I said, scratched the surface. The more we grow, the more impact we can make. So in closing, our goal for the next phase of Latitudes is twofold. On a grassroots level, we would like to reach many more thousands of artists across the continent. So if any of you listening are, you know of artists or galleries or organizations that would benefit from working with Latitudes, please do come and reach out to me. And then on the other end of the scale, we would like artists we've incubated on the continent to grow to a point where they can take a seat at the table at global events. So to do this, we need to leverage the power of partnership and create opportunities for global exposure. So once again, you know, if you have partners that would be interested in helping us expand into different countries, or ideas for international events, or for artists to access funding opportunities, it would be fantastic to hear about those. There's still so much work to be done, and we can achieve so much more through the power of partnership. And this slide really talks to, you know, opportunities for engagement with Latitudes. So yeah, thank you. I think I'm going to stop sharing and go to questions.
Thank you so much, Lucy. There's so much to take in. I knew that you're building all kinds of layered infrastructure, but it's just really, you know, there's so much more to it as you've described it, and also just how thoughtful your methodology is for each level, you know, whether it's the Anna Award, the podcast, you know, looking at residencies, the on-site series, and now a Center for the Arts. You know, it's just amazing. And it's interesting, you know, when you talk about your kind of pragmatism and looking at where you are and, you know, making the commitment to be there, and knowing that there are challenges, but also these really wonderful opportunities at the same time. I think, you know, it feels like you're just building this incredible support structure. And you talked about that right at the beginning, you know, like looking at ways of decolonizing, understanding you've got a lot of young people there that are looking for a pathway in. And I think it's also so exciting that you allow artists just to participate, and even if they don't have representation, they can be part of your site. Like, I think that's just groundbreaking, as you said. Like, it really is reshaping, I think, what our ideas are of what an art fair can do and should do. So I was sort of curious about the collector ecology there, and like what you're seeing in terms of like a median age for these collectors. It was exciting to hear people who are purchasing their first work at your art fair, you know, and that you've paid attention to that in terms of the price point and kind of welcoming. That's a kind of form of hospitality to acknowledge that it's a big leap to suddenly think of yourself as an art collector. So So yeah, I was just curious about that, if there's like a median age, or if it's, are you seeing many generational collectors where someone who's, passing the collecting spirit on to their children, like, just curious about what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of art fairs in South Africa, and the fairs are for collecting. They're kind of important moments in our calendar every year. So and it is quite nice because they have a beginning and an end, and one can kind of look at them, retrospectively and see what's sold and that kind of thing. So there's Cape Town Art Fair. There's a fair in Joburg called FNB Art Joburg, and then there's our fair. And in that kind of ecology, we are known as the kind of the more sort of a more emerging place for young collectors. And so, but that really didn't exist as much. When you go to Cape Town Art Fair or Joburg Art Fair, the price points are much higher. So our kind of in South African rands, which we'll have to convert, but it's I guess it's like 18 rands to the dollar right now, to give you an idea. But we sell mostly, up to 100,000 rand at our fair. So it is the kind of the lower end of the art market, but it really is a much more diverse audience at our fair. So in terms of representation, which is really exciting. So we just have all kinds of people come to our fair, and as I was saying, young people buying their works for the first time. So it is a nice young audience. I would say that probably most of our buyers are around 25 to sort of 45 in terms of age. And but we also have a lot of corporate collecting in South Africa, so that's fantastic. Like, whilst we have this, we don't put a limit to the value of the artworks that one can show. And so we do have, for example, a corporate at our fair in 2023 bought something for over R1 million it was a sculpture that was exhibited at our fair. So, and they are very supportive, our corporates in South Africa, in terms of collecting. So that's great. And so what's interesting is it's quite a European audience that one finds in Cape Town. I'm sure if you visited, you'll see that, there's a lot of kind of Germans living in South Africa. And so it's a different kind of, it's quite a European, and the work is also quite different. So one will see different kinds of work pop up at the Cape Town Art Fair, as opposed to our fair, which is kind of, more local kind of experience, and an African experience, which is exciting. You actually feel like you're in Africa when you're in Joburg, as opposed to Cape Town.
Wow.
Yeah, but I would say there's about there are serious collectors, which, it's not very many compared to the population, like probably 1,000 in South Africa, like major collectors. But what's exciting with these kinds of initiatives is how we've seen collecting also becoming kind of an aspirational thing, which is interesting. And, replacing the kind of conspicuous consumption of like buying handbags and cars and that kind of thing. People are really excited about getting involved in contemporary art, which is super. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Mm.
That sort of leads me to, there was a couple of things. One was, I was wondering if you're starting to see some key impacts in the community of your fair. And you mentioned a few of them, like just seeing Cynthia Malaga's just, taking off, being given that platform. And I wondered, yeah, just if there's some things that you're starting to kind of see locally, like a little bit of a buzz locally, in Joburg, and and I know that's sort of case by case basis, but I just was curious if you're starting to see the effects.
Yeah. I think it's just nice. Our online platform has helped with this a lot, is that it becomes kind of a resource where a lot of the galleries are finding young artists. And so our fair as well, like because we're putting out these young voices, and it's nice to just see, like, if you see it, the artists will be represented at our fair, and then very quickly they'll be showing with a gallery, and very quickly then, you know, they go on to the international fair circuit, and so that's amazing. And I mean, it's just astounding at how large that impact has grown, and how sort of frequently that happens for us, is to watch these artists move up in the art market. And yeah, so, and I think locally what's also become interesting is because of the way the nature of the online shift during COVID made everybody kind of it leveled out the playing field in some kind of way. And we were able to do something as sort of cheeky as putting independent artists alongside galleries, both online and at our fair, because I think in that moment where the whole world was absolutely like traumatized and nobody really knew what the future held, people were more accepting of that. And so we were lucky to kind of ride that wave, and we didn't receive the kind of criticism that we thought we would. And it's just gone from strength to strength. And now what I'm so excited to see is how the gallery world in South Africa in particular is so much more collaborative. It was sort of notoriously, you know, just by the nature and the model of the art market that depends on galleries, quite territorial, because you have your stable that you need to, you know, defend from other galleries taking artists and that kind of thing. But it really has become a bit more fluid, and we've seen so many collaborations now between galleries as well. So galleries, South African galleries, will collaborate domestically, like a Joburg gallery and a Cape Town gallery, so that the artists can have access to those, you know, different cities and their collector bases, or internationally. So lots of local galleries are working with international galleries in a similar way. So there's just a more openness, and art fairs do play a very important role for coming together. Yeah, just exchange moments.
Yeah, it seems like a much more shared structure, and you sort of, and when you talk about your interest in decolonization, it seems like that's a really powerful thing to do right off the bat, is to consider that methodology, and, you know, and lateralized, you know, kind of structure. So it's really exciting to see that methodology, which powers the whole thing. And I was curious, and about the sponsorship structure in South Africa, and how much support or incentive there is for large scale endeavors, like, you know, for example, in Canada, have, you know, for corporations to be involved, they might have some incentives in terms of, you know, there might be tax structures that are in place and things like that. When I was traveling in Italy, I learned there was no such thing, that there were no tax incentives for donations. So I thought, wow, that really impacts an ecology when you don't have things like that built in. So it's kind of a bit of a gallery wonk question, but I just was curious about, you know, what you see in terms of any support structures on a national scale, on a local scale, and then, you know, public and private, if there are any things that you would look to support your endeavor.
So when we were starting out Latitudes, we really started from nothing. So we actually did apply for a lot of governmental funding, and it was something which came through in the end, but it doesn't function in a smooth way in South Africa. So it's a huge amount of work to apply for funding, and oftentimes it just doesn't actually arrive, or it's very complicated and time consuming. So we were very excited to be able to move to a point where we weren't reliant on government funding in South Africa. And yeah, it's just the bureaucracy was a little bit can be crippling. So it's just wonderful how the corporates have come to the table in South Africa. And there are sort of, you know, tax incentives for supporting arts organizations. It's not hugely formalized in South Africa, but it's, you know, what's interesting is a lot of the programs about 10 years ago would have been run through CSI initiatives, like corporate social investment initiatives for businesses, for banks and that kind of thing. They would have run kind of any arts investment or support through those initiatives. But now the marketing departments of these corporations are actually seeing how powerful art is from a storytelling perspective, and that's so fantastic. And actually, so many companies in South Africa are using the arts to access, wonderful stories of like entrepreneurial success, or what the power of creativity can do. And that's kind of something that we've keyed into. And I think also importantly is because we've developed this very loyal and diverse audience. A lot of corporates are very keen to work with us to access that audience, to access that young, emerging, aspirational audience with spending power, which is exciting. Yeah. I think that we rely on our corporations in the sort of gap of institutional support here. So it would be amazing to have more institutional support, but it's not a reality because it's not a priority. There are more pressing issues, I think, if there is to be governmental spending. And we're up against sport. We actually, our department, there's one department, which is the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. So we actually, are in direct competition there sometimes for funding.
Yeah, it's not an unusual category. I think it has been the category here in Canada as well.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to open this up to our audience as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and we'd love to put your questions to Lucy, or unmute you if you want to ask your questions directly. It's always nice to hear your voices. So yeah, in the meantime, while we're waiting for another question to come in, I also was just looking at, there were interesting stats. Like I loved your thoroughness in terms of how you're gathering this information, because oftentimes, particularly in nonprofits, we're doing a lot of qualitative analysis, but we don't do the same kind of quantitative analysis that you were just referring to. And it really is actually quite exciting to see. And I think those metrics are incredibly powerful, because it seems that those are still the metrics. We can't really describe experiential metrics in the same way. So and it seems to me that those could also perhaps shape some kind of policy. And do you think about what you're doing in terms of, somehow being influential and shaping policy? Like, what are your interactions with any program officers or ministers or things like that? Do you have them come to your events? Are you able to talk with them a little bit about this model? And just curious.
I think that it's not a very kind of transparent, like our Department of Arts and Culture is not as accessible as it can be. But if I do hope to actually formalize what I mentioned, Latitudes education, it would be incredible if we were able to actually work with governmental institutions to broaden that, is to make these programs, which are just based off practical skills development, because so many organizations like Latitudes in South Africa can be hosting interns and hosting mentorship programs, really just with professionals in mentorship positions. So we've actually seen that a lot of the participants in our curator lab and artist lab, curator lab especially, I mean, all they really needed, we have a call out, and then we just see, is how many people we can actually host. And if we think that they will contribute and actually get benefit from the course, and all they need is really an internet connection. And then we put them through and we give them access to all these great people in the field talking about different aspects of what it means to be an arts professional and then we give them sort of a practical task, which actually allows them to create a profile on Latitudes, curate a show, and then sell art, and then keep that going so that they're able to actually make it financially sustainable. And through that program, we've actually hired 3 or 4 people who are now part of the Latitudes team full time. So it's been a way for us to meet young professionals and now employ them full time. So, I mean, that could be happening across the country. There's no reason why in so many more sectors that can't be happening. It's something that we can do practically, even if it is just funding that we get. Well, it's kind of just more easy, it's more accessible, and it's faster, I suppose, to work with corporate institutions who where it's the bureaucracy isn't crippling. So I think that those kinds of things, I'm very excited about the potential for them. If government is able to come on board and work with us, that would be even more amazing. But yeah.
We have a question from Leanne, and just wanted to say quickly, before we go to our questions. So I was lucky enough to be there and actually see your site. I didn't mention that in the intro, but it was so fantastic to be there with Will Acton during Will Acton's residency, and Will Acton's here with us online too in the audience. And, you know, at that time, learning about things like artist-proof studios that with a similar mission to professionalize, you know, offer a route for artists who may not have had artist training and things like that. So I wondered about your, you know, there seems to be that there were lots of, like, we met with the graduate students at the University of Witwatersrand, which looked like a really strong program and really exciting students. And so, yeah, just wondering, it sounds like your interns are already finding you, but I wondered if there's any interest in formalizing some of those partnerships with universities or colleges.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just we will definitely grow into that space. It's kind of like a capacity thing for us now. Our next sort of big focus is we're rebuilding our online platform for the 3rd time.
Wow.
Which is a major operation. It's just that everything in the online space just changes so dramatically and so quickly, but it really does have the biggest reach. So what we would like to do is actually develop a whole course of online resources for interested arts professionals, which would be freely downloadable, so that, you know, wherever you are, you could actually download those and then find your way into the kind of ecosystem and find opportunities, because I think the more accessible we make it, the better.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wow, that's fabulous. So
Yeah.
exciting. So Leanne, so wonderful you're here with us, Leanne, Leanne Niehaus. So I'll read your question out loud here. Considering Latitude's extremely fast growth over a short period of time, how have you and the team coped and plan on coping as Latitude's reach continues to expand?
So yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It's sometimes I kind of have to pinch myself because I'm so used to doing all the things, like, as you know, Leanne, because I know Leanne very well. You know, when you're a gallery, you think you're a gallery manager and that it's kind of sounds quite glamorous, but it can be mopping the floors if there's a flood, for example, or doing all kinds of things. Yeah, it's but right now we've kind of got to a point where our team is about 12 or 13 people and everybody has specific roles, and it feels so great to allow people to focus on their like specific role, because then you really do see people coming into their own and taking an invested sort of approach to their contribution to the company. And because we've been scrambling to get to this point, now it feels like we've all of a sudden just ticked over, and I'm able to see people really enjoying their job as opposed to scrambling and just, you know, getting through the day. And we've just put in place our COO with our first employee that joined us very soon after we started. And it's been amazing to just watch someone rise in their career and take ownership. So there are those kinds of things. And we have a very informal work structure, which my business partner, Roberta, is quite good about leading on. So we do things like we work from home. Everybody gets a work from home day during the week. Our work environment is quite relaxed. It's just more about like, it's not like, you know, work hours. It's really just about what your contribution is. So it's about a culture thing as well. And we've got a very young team. Everyone's in their 20s, besides us, I double that. But yeah, it's just I think it is important to create a nice work culture so that people enjoy coming and being there. Yeah. And then it's fun, you know, working towards something like an art fair has its own energy. And it's wonderful how events are like incredibly stressful things, but once they pull together, it's like watching magic happen. Yeah, thanks for that question.
Are there any other questions from our audience today? Please feel free to type it in the chat. You know, Lucy, you've just been so incredibly generous in sharing this. And it's also interesting what you were talking about in terms of, you know, the way that the different fairs in South Africa kind of have shaped their audience. So you're definitely seeing that your audience in Joburg is, you know, more representative of the actual median age in terms of both collectors and also the artists that are represented. And do you see any of that maybe rubbing off on those fairs? Do you see them kind of noticing that success in that format? And maybe that's about to come, but I'm just curious if there's been any initiatives you've seen that seem like familiar, like, inspired, in the
Yes,
other
we
fairs.
have. We've seen, you know, special projects popping up at these fairs, which are showing like unrepresented artistic talent and that kind of thing, like special projects that are curated. It is actually quite a small community at the end of the day. So, you know, ideas are kind of fast and cheap, and you see things cropping up everywhere. But it's all really about capturing the zeitgeist, and one can't really hold on to those things. Oftentimes we get a bit sad when we see like an artist that we've sort of started working with and have a relationship and have them in Latitudes Online, show them at the fair, and then all of a sudden, you know, they've signed to a gallery, and it can be a bit sad. But then it's our philosophy is really to like have scale and scale our impact. So we can't get sort of hung up on particular relationships because that will just hold us back. So we have to, you know, wish them well and just see the whole industry grow. So yeah.
Exciting. Well, just
Yeah.
sounds like you've been doing such foundational work there, and just want to congratulate you and Roberta and your team on this incredible growth and all these on the thoughtfulness and care that you've put into, you know, assessing what is needed and filling a gap, but more than that, really reshaping an arts ecology. So it's incredibly inspiring. I just thank you so much for being here in your evening. I don't think I've got any further questions for you in the chat. So maybe this is a good time to wrap. And just once again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and the careful way that you've arrived at the model, that, you know, sharing all of those assessments and the data and the building out of the open source software and doing it again now, you know, like just to see that hard work behind the scenes that, you know, can seem so effortless when it's unfolding, but we know when huge events like this happen, it's full of all of that care and coordination. So thank you so much, Lucy.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to share. And yeah, and likewise, congrats on your program at Griffin. It's super exciting, and I always love reading about your many projects. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Wish you could see this one today, but you'll just see it all online. We'll be posting
Yeah.
online. And thanks everyone for attending today. We really appreciate you being here with us on this rainy Sunday afternoon. Okay, have a wonderful evening, Lucy. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.